Hey guys, Crewman here, and in my quest to find the perfect 1440p gaming GPU in 2024, my next stop is the AMD RX 7900 GRE. So let me give you my initial impressions of this thing. The model that I am testing is the Power Color Fighter, $550. So I got the, or $560, I'm sorry. I got the second cheapest one, and Power Color is a pretty good brand. So that was the one I decided to test with. Few quick things about this. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm running this GPU at stock settings. I am not using upscaling in any of my games or any of my testing. I believe if you are going to spend, say $500 plus on a GPU, you should be able to play on your target resolution without upscaling on even the most demanding games. So without further ado, let's go over all the games I'm testing and show you what I got. Another thing I do want to talk about as well is I do not show like graphs like a lot of other people do. I like to show in-game screenshots, and then I like to talk a little bit about each game and then give you my final thoughts at the end. All right, so you can see the test bench right here. I am rocking a Ryzen 5 or a Ryzen 5800 X3D that I repaired actually on an X570 motherboard. I've got 32 gigs of DDR4 CL16, 3600 megahertz RAM in there, an 850 watt power supply, which is overkill for this GPU, and a bunch of random SSDs, Gen 3, they're all Gen 3, I think one might be a Gen 2, on my test bench, and some generic cooler that I plan on replacing. So now that you've seen my test bench, let's get to the gaming performance. So first I want to start off with Helldivers 2. This was in medium settings. I was a little bit disappointed at first because I was only getting 74 FPS, which seemed a little off. So I played a few games on it, and it was okay. Like I said, I couldn't really stop focusing on how disappointed I was at the FPS in medium settings. However, I went and I changed the locked frame rate because it had frame rate locked to the monitor, which was 170 FPS. So I went and changed it, and then this happened. I don't know if you can see it in the top left-hand corner, but I ended up at 101 FPS. Apparently, when you lock the frame rate, actually, I ended up at 125 FPS on all medium, because apparently when you lock the frame rate, it does something that I don't fully understand, but it locks the frame rate. I think it's at a certain percentage of what you would normally be getting, which is kind of why I got 35% lower FPS. But then what I did was I realized I had some FPS to give, so I cranked up the settings. So I put a lot of the most demanding settings on high, like terrain, fog, texture, and lighting, and then I left some of the other ones at medium, and I got 101 FPS, and the game played way smoother, and I went from meh to very, very much impressed and very happy with the performance in Helldivers. And I will move my big head just so you can see what it looks like. So I played like 5 or 6 games at this FPS, and again, it felt buttery smooth, and I think Helldivers is a great game that doesn't need DLSS, in my humble opinion. I also had no crashes and no other issues to note. And I was using the latest AMD driver as of April 4th, 2024. So let's move on to a newer title, Horizon Forbidden West. Now, this one was weird. It was a little foggy and like a little grainy, but I realized, I went on Reddit, and I assumed if I had this problem with Helldivers, maybe I had it for Horizon 2. Don't lock your frame rate. Let the frame rate open, and it opened up, and it looked incredible, as you can see here. The terrain looked great. The grass looked great. Everything was very, very crisp, and I like to look at vegetation to get an idea. Like, you can really see what your graphics card can do when you focus on the little things like vegetation, rocks, etc. I had this at max settings, and even in combat, I was getting, I ranged from about 90 FPS to about 75 to 80. In heavy combat, the game was ran flawless, and it was perfectly playable. I 10 out of 10 would recommend. I beat this game for PlayStation, and I'm playing it again for PC. I love it, and the game is new, and it was really encouraging to see that this card ran so well on it at max settings at 1440p with upscaling off. So let's move on to a less demanding title. I just wanted to see what Call of Duty would look like, and I benchmarked it, and I played in like 2 games at max settings, as you can see here, with upscaling off, and I got 147 FPS. And in game, I basically cracked the FPS, my monitor's cap at 170 the entire time. And Call of Duty has its own faults, and I don't really play it much, but I like to use it as like my esports title instead of like Overwatch or Apex Legends, because I think this is a little bit more demanding, but it can still run on basically anything you throw on it. I think I got it to run on everything, but a 780 Ti, I wouldn't work on that. So anyway, the 7900 GRE maxes out 1440p, and it does great, no issues. Now the next two games are really demanding, and these are Alan Wake 2, and then I'll be doing Cyberpunk 77. So in Alan Wake 2, my settings were all on medium, ray tracing was all on medium, and DLSS was off. This was a pretty heavy scene. This is sometime in Act 2 or 3, I forget. You don't have a benchmark, so you kind of... I like this scene because there's a lot of shadows, there's a lot of lighting, and I know there's not any action. Like, I could just kind of walk around and see everything. I was kind of going between 28 and 30 FPS. It felt a tiny bit clunky, like a tiny bit. I think if you were to, say, drop ray tracing slightly, or maybe lower some settings, it would be fine. Like, I'm not saying it's not playable. Like, I played it. It wasn't perfect, right? I had a tiny bit of choppiness. But look, Alan Wake is a very, very, very demanding game. And when I say tiny bit, I really want to stress it was like a tiny bit. You would notice it occasionally. I think if you were to either drop the settings a little bit lower or maybe lower ray tracing, you could get a few more FPS where it would give you a smooth gaming experience. So it was slightly disappointing, but like I said, Alan Wake is a very demanding game, and my personal preference of refusing to use upscaling of any kind definitely comes into play here. Like, if you were to upscale this game, I think it would give you that extra performance boost you needed, probably to get you around 40 to 45 FPS to make it easily playable while leaving ray tracing on. So I admit that. But like I said, I think if you're spending $500-600 on a graphics card, I don't think you should have to have upscaling on to play even the most demanding games with the settings that you want to play them in. That's just my opinion. Now to a game that's equally as heavy. The first thing I want to do is I want to run the benchmark. I wanted you to see the settings that I was using. I have ray tracing on medium. I have upscaling off. And I was getting 35 FPS. It was unlike Alan Wake, it was a smooth 35 FPS. I don't know if it's the drivers or how the game is optimized. I honestly don't know, but I think Alan Wake is a tiny bit more demanding than Cyberpunk, if we're being honest, but they're both very, very demanding games. And like I said, I got 34 FPS on the benchmark, and then I went on a spree. Like Alan Wake, I only played for like 2 or 3 minutes. Cyberpunk 2077, I like aggravated a lot of cops, and I went on a rampage just to see what I could do. And you can see a screenshot right here. And I liked it. I thought it looked great. I really liked the lighting effects. I felt that they looked pretty solid at medium settings, which was kind of impressive. And there was a lot of action going on in the scene as well. I just wanted to capture the lighting effects. Ray tracing medium, 1440p. It was definitely a beautiful game. And I pushed it pretty hard. I was getting like 37. Sometimes I was even cracking 41, 42 FPS. So overall, I would say that for $500, if you get this thing for about $550, $560, I wouldn't pay any more than that. You are getting the performance that you would expect out of a GPU that costs that much. You are maxing 1440p settings in mostly every single game. You can have ray tracing on, and it's a playable experience. I really, really, really like ray tracing. And I actually thought the ray tracing in this was very good. Even in Alan Wake, when it was getting pushed a little bit and you had a few stutters here and there, I really was impressed with how it did in ray tracing. And we're not talking ray tracing in any titles. We're talking ray tracing in Cyberpunk 2077 and Alan Wake, which basically are kind of like the crises of our time. All the other games I tested on, I had buttery smooth experiences with upscaling off and max settings in everything with like the exception of Cyberpunk 2077. Even Helldivers, I could have cranked the settings a little higher and gotten a tiny bit lower FPS, but I think 100 FPS, 90 to 100 FPS is where you want to be, and it gives you a really good experience. So overall, if you like AMD and if you are worried about VRAM, and I'm not, I think you don't need 16 gigabytes of VRAM. I think 12 is enough. I think this is a great GPU. I have not overclocked it yet, and I plan on overclocking it in another video, and I want to push it to see what you can do on it, because I think the 7000 series has a decent amount of overclocking headroom, which is something that I do want to take a look at. But if you didn't want to overclock it and you just wanted to play it stock, I think if you got this thing for $500 and say $550, $560 or less, I think you could be very, very happy, and you will get what you expect, which is basically maxing out everything at 1440p resolution, and the 16 gigs of VRAM is more than enough, but it'll help the card age very well, and this is a card that you could keep 4 years and continue to max out 1440p resolution. So overall, my first impressions were very, very good, and I think this is a great GPU from AMD as long as you can get it, you know, in the lower tier price points. I would not buy a more expensive AIB. I would certainly not pay $600 or more for this GPU. So thank you guys for watching this quick 7900 GRE review. I will have much more content coming up on this GPU. For watching, please like and subscribe. The march to 4,000 continues. Croup Man